agriculture was known to the people thousands of years ago. Even today, 70% of our population is engaged directly or indirectly in agriculture. Since we all need food, so in order to provide food for a large population, regular production, proper management, and the distribution of food is necessary. So, when plants of the same kind are grown and harvested at one place on a large scale, then it is called as crop. For example, the crop of wheat means that all the plants grown on that piece of land is that of wheat. So, based on the types of products obtained, we can classify the crops as cereals, pulses, oilseed crops, fiber crops, etc. So, there are different types of plant crops. There are pulses, sugar crops, plantation crops, and many more. And we can also classify crops based on the season in which they are cultivated. So, in our country, the climatic conditions like temperature, humidity, and rainfall vary from one region to another. So, according to all these climatic conditions, there is a rich variety of crops in different parts of the country. So, even we have such great variety, we broadly classify our cropping patterns as follows. So, the first is the Kharif crops. So, Kharif is an Arabic term which means autumn. So, the crops which are grown in rainy season are called the Kharif crops. Sowing of seeds is done at the beginning of the monsoon season, that is in the month of June, and harvesting of the crops is done by the end of the monsoon season, that is during September. Examples of the Kharif crops include rice, maize, soybean, groundnut, cotton, jowar, bajra, etc. Next classification will involve the Rabi crops, which is an Arabic name which means spring. So the crops which are grown in winter season are called the Rabi crops, and these crops are generally sown in the beginning of the winter season, that is in the October, and they are harvested by the month of March. Examples involve wheat, barley, gram, potato, mustard, etc. So, besides these two, that is the Kharif crops and the Rabi crops, there we grow in between March and June. In between March and June. So, Kharif is harvested in June while we end the Rabi crops in March. So, in between March and June, there are some plantations done which is known as a special category of crops, that is the Zaid crops. So, these crops involve muskmelon, watermelon, etc. Next, we'll understand what is staple food. So, the food that is consumed on a large scale in a particular region is called the staple food of that region. For example, wheat is a staple food of North India, while rice is a staple food of South India because that is consumed on a large scale in that particular region. And the paddy requires a lot of water, and therefore it is grown only in the rainy season. Now we'll understand the various agricultural practices which are done in order to grow crops. So, various activities undertaken by farmers over a period of time for the cultivation of crops are referred to as agricultural practices. So, some of the practices involved are the preparation of soil, next is sowing of seeds, and the third important measure is adding manure and fertilizers, and fourth important is irrigation, that is watering the crops, and the fifth one is protection from weeds, which is unwanted plants, and next harvesting and proper storage of the seeds. So first we'll start with the preparation of soil. So preparation of soil is the first step before growing the crops. So the process of loosening and turning of soil is called tilling or plowing of soil. Since only a few centimeters of the top layer of the soil supports plant growth, so turning and loosening of the soil brings the nutrient, that is rich soil, on the top so that plants can use these nutrients. So it is one of the most important steps of agricultural practices, and it is done by using a plow. So plowing is done by using a plow. Plows are made of wood or iron, which are pulled by a pair of bullocks or by a tractor in the modern days. So if soil is very dry, it may need some watering before plowing if the soil is dry. The plowed field may have big pieces of soil which are called the crumbs. Even after plowing, we can find big pieces of soil. So these crumbs are broken down with a plank. Also, the field has to be leveled for a uniform sowing as well as for the irrigation purposes. So the field have to be flattened. One side it have to not have heaps or anything like that. And the leveling of soil is done with the help of a leveler. So the plowing helps in the following ways. So what is the importance of plowing? So the first importance is it aerates the soil by creating pores that allow the roots to breathe easily. And it helps the soil drainage. It helps in easy penetration of roots into the soil, which anchors the plant firmly, and it exposes the soil pests to the predators, and it uproots the weeds, that is unwanted plants, and kills them. And it is important point to note that loosened soil helps in the growth of earthworms and microbes present in the soil. They further turn and loosen the soil and add humus to it. They also promote the decomposition of the dead remains of plants and animals. So in this way, various nutrients held in the dead organisms are released back into the soil, which is again absorbed by the plants. Hence, these organisms are called the friends of farmers or nature's gardeners. So it's important to remember that earthworms are called friends of farmers or nature's gardeners. Sometimes manure is added to the soil even before plowing. So this helps in the proper mixing of manure with the soil, and soil is watered before sowing. So the next important step is sowing the seeds. So sowing is the process of placing the seeds in the plowed or the leveled soil. So we'll place the seeds in the leveled or the plowed soil. Farmers commonly prefer to use the seeds which provide a high yield. So before sowing, good quality seeds are selected. So the good quality seeds should be clean, they have to be disease free, and they have to be high yielding variety, HYV, high yielding variety. Selection of seeds. Good quality healthy seeds can be separated from the damaged seeds by the following method. So firstly, put some seeds on a crop in a beaker containing water. Shake well and leave the beaker. After some time, we can easily observe that some seeds float while the others settle down at the bottom. Seeds which float are not good for sowing, while seeds which settle down at the bottom are fit for sowing. Damaged seeds become hollow and thus lighter, and therefore they float on the water. Seeds can be also pre-treated with chemicals such as insecticides and fungicides in order to prevent seed-borne diseases. So while sowing the seeds, we should take care of the following aspects. The first aspect is the right depth. So seeds should be sown at an appropriate depth. If the seeds are sown too deep, then they will not get enough air for respiration. Germination of seeds will also be adversely affected as the shoots should have to struggle very hard to pass through the layers of the soil to get sunlight and fresh air. If the seeds are sown on these shallow layers of the soil, they will be eaten by birds. So they have to not be too deep or not on top of the soil. They have to be at the right depth. And the second thing to note is the proper intervals. So proper spacing of seeds, that is sowing the seeds at suitable length from one another, is important in order to avoid crowding of plants. So if many seeds are placed in a particular area, there will be a competition for their growth, for the nutrition and every other factor for their proper growth. So they have to be placed at proper length so that they will have their own space to grow. And this will not be able to get sufficient amount of sunlight, water and nutrients from the soil. So proper interval is very important. Next thing to note is seeds should not be grown in dry soil since moisture is required for seed germination. Next thing to note is seeds should not be sown in highly wet soil, neither highly dry soil nor highly wet soil, because too wet soil will become hard on drying and plumule will strive hard to come out of the ground. And the next to remember is appropriate distance between the seeds is very important to avoid overcrowding, and this allows the plants, and at a times few plants may have to be removed to prevent overcrowding. That is one of the most commonly practiced for seed sowing is broadcasting. So this is a method in which seeds are scattered randomly in the field by hand. It is not a very effective method as it neither ensures proper uniform spacing between the seeds nor the right depth. And thus it is better to use agricultural tools for sowing the seeds. So broadcasting method is a traditional method in which you basically just scatter the seeds around the field with hand. But now we don't have to do this method because we have some agricultural implements which can help us in proper spacing and depth of the seeds. Next, we'll study about adding manure and fertilizers. Next step is adding manure and fertilizers after sowing the seeds. So crops require certain nutrients for their growth and development, which they absorb from the soil. When crops are grown continuously in the same field, they use nutrients present in the soil, which leads to deficiency of some specific nutrients in the soil. So the deficiency in the soil can be replenished by adding manure and nutrients to the soil. Both manures and fertilizers are major sources of nutrients for the plants. Hence, they are used in crop production for better growth of the plants. So when a piece of land is there and you keep on growing the plants in that particular area, after some time we'll observe that the plants might have used up all the natural nutrients present in the soil. So the nutrients in the soil will be replenished day by day, and the further if we plant the plants, they'll not be able to grow properly. So by adding manure and fertilizers, you also retain the original plants nutrients, and also the growth of the plants will be much better. So first we'll study about manure. So manure is an organic substance obtained by the decomposition of plant or animal wastes, that is cattle dung, plant residues, etc. So the process of adding manure to the field in order to replenish the soil with nutrients is called manuring. So the process of adding manure is called manuring. Improper or insufficient manuring results in weak plants, especially in those areas where farmers grow crops regularly, that is without paying any interval between the two successive crops. Now we'll study the advantages of this manuring. So the first advantage is enhances the water holding capacity of the soil, and it makes the soil porous, due to which exchange of gases becomes easier. It increases the friendly microbes in the soil by providing them food, and it improves the texture of the soil and replenishes the soil with nutrients at a lower cost. But there are also some disadvantages of manuring. That is, manures are bulky with low nutrient content in comparison to fertilizers. So they are very bulky, but they have very low nutrition content. And the nutrients of the manure are released slowly, not keeping in pace with the high and rapid demand of the nutrients by the improved variety of crops. And it is not nutrient specific. So it is not of such much use because a particular nutrient is required in the soil. Suppose we have a plant, a field, and their nitrogen is very less. But manures are not available in such a case where you only require proper amount of nitrogen. There will be all the nutrients present in manure. So it is not nutrient specific in comparison to the fertilizers. Now we'll study about fertilizers. So another way of enriching the soil with nutrients is by adding the fertilizers. Fertilizers are the chemical substances. So you can understand that manure is a organic substance while fertilizer is a chemical substance. And it is specific nutrients, that is rich in specific nutrients, unlike the manure. And fertilizers are produced in factories. Some examples are urea, ammonia, sulfate, supersulfate, potash, and many more. And the use of fertilizers has helped farmers to get better yield of crops such as wheat, paddy, and maize. Now we'll understand the advantages of fertilizers. So, fertilizers are nutrient specific and are available in concentrated form. They are required in small quantities, they are easy to store, transport, and use, and the use of fertilizers increases the crop yield within a short period of time. So, in comparison to manure, we need manure in larger amounts, in bulk quantities, while fertilizers in smaller quantities are enough for providing nutrition to the plant. Next, we'll study the disadvantages of fertilizers. So, excessive use of fertilizers makes the soil less fertile, and they also cause water pollution in case of surface water runoff. So, if we in a particular field, if we add fertilizers and the water from that field goes and joins to the river, then there will be pollution because fertilizers are chemicals. So, when these chemicals go and run to the rivers, then it will increase the pollution in the rivers as well as the crops are also filled with chemicals and they do not provide any humus to the soil. Therefore, in order to maintain the fertility of the soil, we have to substitute fertilizers by organic manure. Even though fertilizers are better to use in comparison to manure, but by seeing the pollution which the fertilizers causes, we have to shift to using organic manures. Now we'll study the differences between manure and fertilizers. Differences between manure and fertilizers. So the first is manures are natural while fertilizers are man-made and rich in a particular nutrient. Second one is manures are prepared in the fields, fertilizers are prepared in factories. And the third difference is manure provides a lot of humus to the plant. It provides humus to the soil, while this will not provide any humus to the soil. And manures contain small amounts of essential plant nutrients, while fertilizers are rich in plant nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And next is nutrients present in the manures are absorbed slowly by the crops. Being while the fertilizers being soluble in water, fertilizers are readily absorbed by the crop plants. So these are absorbed slowly while these are absorbed rapidly by the crop plants. So with this you understood the differences between fertilizers and manures. Now we'll move on to the next important step, that is irrigation. So water is very necessary for the survival and proper growth and development of flowers, fruits and seeds of plants. So plant contains nearly 90% of water and water is absorbed by the plant roots from the soil. So water is very essential because germination of seeds will not take place under dry conditions. Roots fail to develop and elongate in dry soil. Nutrients, minerals, and fertilizers are also absorbed along with the water, and nutrients which are dissolved in water get transported to each and every part of the plant. So, agricultural fields need to be watered from time to time according to the need of different crops. Different crops need different amounts of water. So, the supply of water to the crops at different intervals of time is called irrigation. So, irrigation is the supply of water to the crops at different intervals of time. So, the time and frequency will vary from crop to crop, soil to soil, and season to season. Like in summers, the frequency of watering is increased due to the higher loss of water in the form of water vapors from the soil and leaves. So in summer we usually water our plants more than in comparison to winter because there will be more transpiration in summer, and water requirement of rice is higher as compared to that of wheat and maize. So, in case of crops like wheat and maize, excess water supply to the fields may result in condition known as water logging. So, it reduces air in the soil and thereby damaging the roots. So, either you put less water or you supply more water, it is dangerous to the plant. So, we need to know the water amount of water and the frequency in which we have to water the plants. So, this involves the irrigation. And there are different sources of irrigation. There are different sources of irrigation, that is from the wells, tube wells, ponds, lakes, rivers, dams, and canals. They are all the sources of irrigation. And there are various methods of irrigation. So they can be traditional methods or they can be modern methods. So the traditional methods involve the pulley system, chain pump, lever system, and many more, while the modern systems involve sprinkler systems and the drip system. So traditional is pulley system, chain pump, and lever system, while the modern involved the sprinkler system and the drip system. So first we'll study about the traditional methods of irrigation. So different methods are used to lift the water up available in wells, lakes, and ponds in different regions for the purpose of irrigation. Cattle or human labor is used in these methods. Although these methods are cheaper, traditional methods are cheaper, but they are less efficient. And nowadays, pumps are generally used for lifting water. Diesel, biogas, electricity, and solar energy is used to run these pumps. So next we'll study about the modern methods of irrigation. As compared to the traditional methods of irrigation, modern methods of irrigation help us to use water economically. That is, we don't actually overuse the waters, but we use in the right amounts, and it is also economical for us. So the first is the sprinkler system. So this system is more useful in areas where land surface is not uniform and sufficient water is not available. So the perpendicular pipes having rotating nozzles on top are joined to the main pipeline at regular intervals. And when water is allowed to flow through the main pipe under pressure with the help of a pump, it escapes from the rotating nozzles which sprinkle water in all the directions. Water gets sprinkled on the crop as if it is raining. This method is very useful for sandy soil because sandy soil has less water holding capacity. Next is the drip system. So it is called drip system because in this method the water falls drop by drop just as the position of the roots through a network of pipes and valves. It is the best technique for watering fruits, gardens and trees, fruit plants, gardens and trees. Water is not wasted at all. So it is the great practice in regions arid and semi-arid zones where availability of water is poor. It is also known as trickle irrigation or micro irrigation as the system provides water to plants drop by drop. So when we are irrigating the crop, it is important to also protect the crop from weeds. So in a field, many unwanted plants often start growing along with the main crops which we wanted to grow on that field. So all the undesirable plants other than the main crop is called weed. So weed is an unwanted and uncultivated plant in a field. So there are many examples such as amaranthus, avena, chenopodium and many other weeds. So the process of removal of weeds is called weeding. Why is this weeding very important? Because weeds compete with the main crop for water, nutrients, space and light, and thus they affect the growth of the main crop. They may release the toxins which could damage the main crop itself. Some weeds interfere in the harvesting and may be poisonous for both animals and human beings. So, several methods are employed for weeding. So, some of the methods of weeding are plowing, manual removal, and with the help of weedicides, and even biological methods are also there for removing weeds. So, the first is plowing. So, tilling before sowing of crops helps in uprooting and killing of weeds which may then dry up and get mixed with the soil. Next is the manual weeding. So manual removal includes physical removal of weeds by using trowel, harrow or a seed drill. So a trowel is used for uprooting or cutting the weeds close to the ground from time to time, but it is a very lengthy process or it involves a lot of hard work. Next is the involvement of weedicides. So weeds are also controlled by using certain chemicals which are called weedicides like 2,4-D, that is 2,4 dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. And there are many more other weedicides, and these are sprayed in the fields to kill the weeds and they do not damage the crops. The weedicides are diluted with water to prepare required concentrations and sprayed in the fields by using a sprayer. So the best time for the removal of weeds is their pre-reproductive phase, that is a vegetative phase, that is before they produce flowers or seeds. Spraying weedicides may affect the health of the farmers, so they should use these chemicals very carefully. They should cover their nose and mouth with a piece of cloth or a mask while spraying these chemicals. Next is the biological methods. So, biological control of weeds involves the deliberate use of insects or some other organisms which consume or specially will damage the weed plants. So, eradication of prickly pear cactus by using cochineal insects is one such example of biological weeding. So, next step is after weeding will involve harvesting. So, harvesting of a crop is a very important step. So, it refers to the cutting of the crop after maturity. In harvesting, crops are pulled out or cut, or they are cut close to the ground by various means. It usually takes 3 to 4 months for a cereal crop to mature. So, the harvested plants called produce represents the crop yield. So the agricultural tools used for harvesting will involve sickle, harvester and a combine. So combine is a combined harvester and a thresher. A combine has a sharp edge for cutting off the tops of the grain plants such as wheat, and then it separates the harvested grain seeds from the chaff. And the next agricultural tool which is used is winnowing. So farmers with small holdings of land do the separation of grain and chaff by using wind. This process is called winnowing. So the chaff being lighter is blown a little far away by the wind and then the grain. So which being heavier falls straight to the ground. Next step after harvesting, the very important step is storage. Storage is very important because without storage there is no use of harvesting. So most crops are harvested once in a year, so thus they are available in plenty during the selective season. So for getting seasonal foods throughout the year, they are stored in a safe storage. They should be protected from moisture, insects, and rats, and some microorganisms. Generally, the grains are stored in gunny bags or in metallic bins at a small scale and in silos and granaries at a large scale. So, during storage, grains and seeds are subjected to spoilage and wastage by various means. So, grains are stored so that they can last for a long period of time between two harvesting seasons, and also to ensure that there is no shortage of food in case of crop failure. So, the stock of grains which is stored for emergency is known as the buffer stock. So, which is stored for emergency is known as buffer stock in case of crop failure. So, the factors affecting the storage of crops will either include biotic factors or the abiotic factors. So, biotic factors include organisms which can damage the crop are called the pests, such as insects, rodents, birds, and other microorganisms. Abiotic factors involve the, the temperature. The microorganisms and enzymes are most active at moderate temperatures, and therefore food grain should be stored at lower temperatures. So the next one is the moisture. So fresh crop has more moisture. For safe storage, the moisture content of the food grain should be less than 14% by weight. The greater amount of moisture present in the food grains increases the rate of infection by microorganisms, and the population of seed insects increases rapidly. Also, due to high moisture, germination capacity of the grain seeds is lost. So before storing the grains, they are properly drained in the sun to reduce their moisture content. And this prevents the attack by insect, pests, bacteria and fungi. Other protective measures are like maintenance of hygiene in the godowns, warehouses or stores, and for checking the infestation of stored reduce, and insecticides in the form of fumes, and dried neem leaves are used for storing food grains at home, which is biopesticide. Neem is a biopesticide. Next, we obtain food from plants, but we also obtain food from animals. So, like plants, animals also provide us different kinds of food. They provide us milk, eggs, meat, honey, and many other useful products for which they are also reared on a large scale in farms like the crops. So, now we'll study about animal husbandry. So, animal husbandry is a branch of agriculture which deals with the feeding, shelter, and health care of domestic animals. It is important to remember it involves the feeding, shelter, and health care of domestic animals on a large scale. It can also be defined as an agricultural practice of breeding and raising the livestock. So, with this, we have completed agriculture as a whole part along with understanding what is animal husbandry.